The Byzantine imperial army is preparing for war. The news spread quickly throughout Medina and the nearby oasis. The Byzantines were planning to wipe out the Muslims with their mighty army. But the blessed Prophet knew that with the help of Allah, the Muslims could show that they were strong enough to hold their own. In order to stop the Byzantines, he called upon Muslims to come forward for jihad. Banded together, committed to Allah, and striving in His cause, they would be stronger than ever before. Enormous amounts of equipment, swords and armor, provisions of all kinds would be needed, and great quantities of water, since it was now summer and they had to cross waterless deserts in order to round up their army. Who would follow the blessed Prophet's call? Who would go forth in the heat of summer just when the crops should be harvested? Who would leave behind their families and the comfort of their homes in order to face a daunting enemy? And most important of all, who would be willing to donate their wealth, their provisions and personal belongings to provide for such a defense? Some who were not sincere Muslims would hold back, but the true believers in Allah and His Messenger were eager to do all they could. Umar was one of these. Here was the chance he had been waiting for, to be true to his God and to himself, and to prove to the blessed Prophet his sincerity, faith, and devotion. Returning home in haste, he ordered his family to collect all their belongings. Now listen, each one of you will keep half of what you own, and the other half you will give to me, so I may give it to the Prophet for the cause of jihad. Umar set the example by bringing forth his armor and all his wealth, which he divided into two piles. His wife counted out the jewelry and trinkets which she had carefully saved from the time of the emigration to Medina. Into Umar's hands she dropped one pair of golden earrings. "Did you not hear?" protested Umar. "I said half. Give me one earring." "But my dear husband," laughed his wife, "if I give you one earring, nobody will buy it, and if I keep the other, it will be worthless to me. Therefore I give you both." Umar was delighted with the amount of goods he was able to give from his household. His arms were laden with every kind of valuable, and his children trotted along behind, carrying the rest. On the way to the blessed Prophet's house, he spied Abu Bakr, headed in the same direction. Abu Bakr didn't seem to be carrying much, as far as Umar could see. "Praise Allah, for once I shall be better than Abu Bakr. For once I'll surpass him in doing the will of Allah and obeying Allah's messenger." Umar was feeling very elated and very happy with himself as he entered the blessed Prophet's house. "This is my humble offering in response to your appeal," said Umar, as he staggered forward with his load. "You are free to use it in any way for the sake of Allah." "And what have you left behind for yourself and your family?" asked the blessed Prophet, who was both pleased and concerned. He was pleased that Umar had brought so much, but he was concerned that Umar's family might be left with too little. "Oh, they have plenty, they have enough. Please don't worry," said Umar. "But how much?" persisted the blessed Prophet. "As much as I have brought you," confessed Umar. "I divided everything up, half to us and half to the cause of Allah." The blessed Prophet smiled and nodded with approval. Now up stepped Abu Bakr. He placed the small amount he had brought before the blessed Prophet, who asked him the same question he'd asked Umar. "What have you left behind for your family?" Abu Bakr looked away. He really did not want to say that he had left nothing behind. At the same time, he could not hide anything from Allah's messenger. "They will be well taken care of," he answered. "I have left behind for them Allah and His messenger. As for belongings and such things, I have brought you what I have." The blessed Prophet smiled warmly and affectionately at his friend Abu Bakr. Once again, Abu Bakr had shown his spirit of self-sacrifice and trust in Allah and the blessed Prophet. From the very first years he had followed the blessed Prophet. He had given all he owned, and he had accompanied the blessed Prophet on the hijrah to Medina. Umar returned home feeling ashamed and not very pleased with himself. Once again, Abu Bakr has proved to be a better man than I am, he confessed. There is no limit to his devotion and obedience to Allah and the Prophet.
Our fifth story is Abu Talha and the Beautiful Bird.
In the days of the blessed Prophet Muhammad, there lived a man called Abu Talha. Abu Talha thought himself to be the luckiest man in all Medina, and everyone agreed with him, because he owned a very beautiful garden. What made his garden more precious than anyone else's was a spring of cool, clear water, which kept everything green and beautiful. Nothing was more pleasant, more satisfying to Abu Talha than to do the afternoon prayer in his beautiful garden, with the date palms swaying in the breeze and the gurgle of the nearby spring. For this reason, he very much liked to pray in the garden, and never failed to praise Allah for all the good which he had bestowed upon him. Now, one sleepy afternoon, Abu Talha tucked his prayer mat under his arm and, as usual, made his way to the garden. Humbly he stood, raised his hands, and said, Allahu Akbar. He was just beginning to recite the Quran when another sound, beside the familiar swoosh of the palm trees and the gurgle of the stream, met his ear. A long, high tweet resounded above his head, followed by such a happy-sounding chirp that Abu Talha's eyes popped open in spite of himself. There, perched on the date palm, was the most beautiful bird in the whole wide world. Its wings were as green as emeralds, its tail feathers as red as pomegranate seeds, and it had a little golden head with a black beak that sang its beautiful song to its heart's content. Abu Talha was fascinated. He stared and stared until he suddenly remembered where he was and what he was supposed to be doing. Ashamed of himself, he dutifully went back to the prayer, starting hopefully where he had left off. When he had finished, the bird had flown. Now, this little bird considered itself to be as lucky as Abu Talha. Here was a gorgeous garden with sweet seeds to peck at and a bubbly stream. What better place to build a nest and settle down for the rest of its life? The next day, Abu Talha appeared again at his favorite spot in the garden under the shade of the palm tree and began the prayer. But he failed to notice that the beautiful bird was building a nest on top of the tree. Soon the bird began to sing and whistle so beautifully that Abu Talha lost track of what he was doing. He feasted his eye on the feathered beauty who was hopping from branch to branch, chirping a friendly song. But what am I doing? He asked himself suddenly. Which rak'ah am I on? Number 2? Number 3? Abu Talha heaved a deep sigh, somehow finished the prayer, rolled up his prayer mat, and left the garden. How could the prayer reach Allah if he himself could not remember where he had left off? How could he remember Allah when his heart was full of beautiful gardens, bubbling streams, and bird songs? It was hopeless to try. Abu Talha was an honest man. He knew how important it was for a good Muslim to perform the prayer, paying attention to none but Allah. That very night, he went to visit the blessed Prophet Muhammad. He told the blessed Prophet all about his garden, the date palms, the gurgling stream, and the beautiful bird. Oh, "O Prophet," he said, "I cannot let these things stand in the way of my worship to Allah, so it is better not to have them at all. Please take my garden with all that is in it. I give it to you to use for all the Muslims of Medina." The blessed Prophet Muhammad graciously accepted this gift. Abu Talha was never again distracted from the prayer, and from that time on, hopefully, all his prayers were accepted by Allah.
Our last story is The Wise Disciple.
1,000 years ago, Baghdad was a city of grandeur, of riches, and luxury. It was the capital of the largest empire in the world, the Abbasid Empire, where Harun al-Rashid ruled in all his splendor. From every corner of the earth, trade caravans brought silks and jewels and perfumes to adorn and beautify its inhabitants. Apart from all these worldly riches, Baghdad was also famous as a great center of learning. Scholars of all kinds, mathematicians, astronomers, and philosophers came to live there. Amongst these, there came a man called Junaid, who was not only a renowned teacher and a leader of men, but a godly man with a very high moral character. Junaid was born in the Persian town of Nehavand. His father was a glass merchant, but he'd been brought up in the noblest of traditions by his uncle Sari al-Sakati. When Junaid was only 11 years old, he was taken by Sari on pilgrimage. There, in the Masjid al-Haram, they met with 400 scholars who were all discussing the definition of thankfulness. Junaid and his uncle sat and listened intently. Each scholar felt that his answer was the perfect one, much truer than that of the person who had just spoken. Old Sari knew that his nephew was very wise for someone so young. He was curious to hear what his nephew would say on the subject. He cleared his throat to gain attention. "Admittedly, brothers, your arguments are all worthy of consideration and praise, but I wonder if you would be so good as to listen a moment to my nephew here, who, in spite of his tender age, often surprises me by his remarks. What do you say, Junaid? What is true thankfulness?" The other scholars, surprised and a bit amused by the doting uncle, turned towards the serious-faced youth and encouraged him to speak. Junaid was not intimidated. He raised his high, clear voice and said, "Thankfulness means that we should not misuse a favor which God has bestowed upon us, nor should we use that favor as a source of disobedience." All the scholars were surprised at such a profound answer. Old Sari himself smiled and said, "Why, it seems, Junaid, that your special gift from God will be your tongue." Later, when Junaid was a grown man living in Baghdad, he acquired many disciples and pupils who came to learn from him because of his piety, his understanding, and his sincerity. Some came only to hear his lectures, but others, who were really devoted to him, lived with him all the time. Junaid showed affection and love to everyone and taught them all on equal terms, but there was one disciple whom he seemed to prefer above all others. No one could quite understand why, and as a result they all became quite jealous. Finally, they decided to ask Junaid point blank why he preferred this particular disciple. "He's just like all the rest of us, as far as we can see," they complained. "There isn't anything special about him, so why do you treat him as if there were?" Junaid tried to explain. He is wiser and more disciplined than you are. He is well-mannered, devoted to Allah, and his understanding is quite profound. One day you will find this out for yourselves." No one was very satisfied with this reply. They really couldn't see what Junaid was talking about, but since they respected their teacher, they just kept silent about it. Junaid, meanwhile, realized they had not understood, and decided to show them the truth. The very next day he called them over and told them all to go to the bird market and bring back 20 birds. When they had brought back the birds, he gave them the following instructions. "I want you each to go to a place where no one can see you. Take a knife, kill a bird, then bring it back to me. Only be absolutely sure that no one sees you do it." Each disciple took a bird and left, and before long was back again. One by one they showed Junaid their dead birds, but from the back of the room came a sound of chirping and the fluttering of wings. There stood the favorite disciple holding a very live bird. He was looking a little concerned and surprised, which made everyone laugh all the louder at him. The wise disciple indeed. "What's the matter, brother?" chided one of them. "Don't you know how to obey your teacher's instructions? What a fool!" guffawed another. Junaid called him forward in a stern voice. "Well," he asked, "why didn't you kill the bird as I instructed?" "You said to kill the bird in a place where no one could see," apologized the disciple. "But since Allah sees everything that I do, that was impossible. How can I hide anything from him? That's why I couldn't kill the bird." Junaid nodded his head and turned to the others. "There, you see? You see how wise he is? Compare his measure of understanding with yours, and you'll see why I prefer him." The disciples shuffled their feet and hung their heads. In humble voices they apologized to their master and inwardly asked Allah for forgiveness.